Hi, my name is Jason Clark, and I'm here at South Dakota State University Extension, and today's topic in nutrient management, we're going to be talking about hybrid rye. Hybrid rye is a newer crop that's been starting to grow more for grain crops. We've been using rye crops for cover crops and other things for a long time and for forage. This hybrid rye crop tends to yield more than typical rye, and it's been a good alternative crop because it produces a higher amount of grain than just regular rye. So this hybrid variety has lots of things going for it. If you want information, go ahead and look at extension websites for that. But today we're mostly going to be talking about nitrogen management with data focused that we've done here at South Dakota State University, as well as researchers at the University of Minnesota. So let's go ahead and get started. So just looking at some of these fertilizer response trials, the biggest thing we want to know is some of these grain crops is we want to know how much nitrogen put on. So some previous research has shown us we need about 30 pounds of N per acre in the fall. And then what we're really looking at is how much spring nitrogen rates do we need. So we applied anywhere from 0 to 240 pounds of N per acre. And with these nitrogen rate response curves, we're looking at as increasing nitrogen rate goes up, how will yield response. Typically, it's going to go up until it hits kind of a level where it plateaus, and this is what we call an optimal nitrogen rate. And that's what we're trying to find with this research is where is that typical optimal nitrogen rate for hybrid rye in South Dakota conditions. So we're going to give a few sites. We've only been doing this for a couple of years. We're going to give you a few examples of some things we've seen. So we're going to start at Clear Lake in 2023, where it had 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre already in the soil when we started. Now we're going to look at rye yield versus that spring nitrogen application. And here we're going to see it's pretty flat. It doesn't go up a whole lot like other ones. It stays pretty flat. And we're getting here, depending on what types of curves you're looking at, on average, you're looking at about 50 pounds of N per acre that crop needed in 2023 in Clear Lake. Now, if we wanted to move to a site in Beersford in South Dakota, we had 45 pounds of nitrogen per acre in the top 2 feet. Now, if we look here, this one is even flatter. It doesn't really have much response in 2024. So very low, only 5-10 pounds of nitrogen per acre was all that was needed in that year. If we moved to Beersford in 2025, the response curve is a little bit more varied, but we kind of do see a response initially from the 0 going up, and we can see a little bit of curve here. And that's around about 10 to 18 pounds of nitrogen per acre that we're looking at there that we needed to optimize yield. So the next thing we looked at is we didn't take a whole lot of nitrogen, anywhere between 10 to 50 pounds of N in the first couple of years. We've done this at a few sites. But we also want to look at nitrogen source and timing with these trials. So we want to look at 2 rates, 60 and 90 pounds of N per acre. The 90 is a little bit high. The 60 is typically where we'd normally recommend. And we wanted to look at a single application in March for that spring application, or we wanted to use an inhibitor-based urea with a single application in March, along with a split application where we applied it some in March and then the rest of it in April or May. So it looked kind of like this, where we have our spring application, we have our amount in March, we have our amount in spring when we did that, 30 or 60, amount of in May for a total amount of 60 or 90 between the March application and the 2 spring, April and May applications. So this is the first year we've done that. So the very preliminary data, this is 2025 in Beersford, which was a very dry spring. So our yields were not as well as they could have been or typically are. So we'll see that right quick here. This is our 60 pound N rate. And we're going to first of all look at our urea, which is about 62 bushels per acre, which is about half of what we typically get. In 2024, we got about 120 bushels per acre. So you can see how much the weather really decreased our yields in this year. So we can see in a dry year what we're going to see. So that urea, that super U with that inhibitor, didn't change yields very much, very similar. There, if we split that between March and April, went down a little bit, so waiting too long can be detrimental at the 60 pound rate. Pretty similar rates here as well, with only 54 bushels per acre. If we moved it to a higher rate than normal, about a 90 pound event per acre in that spring timing, we saw urea by itself was pretty similar to super U. Super U kind of increased a little bit with those inhibitors, but not statistically different because they still share both our A's and B's. If we split apply that, had the highest yield, but again, statistically similar with the variation between replications. If we waited till May, we did see a little bit of decrease on average, but nothing statistically big enough to say it's different. So single applications or split applications both seem to work well with hybrid rye in this dry year. We'll see going forward if that continues, and hopefully we get some more moisture in these coming years to see the differences. So some other things that we haven't looked at, the University of Minnesota has. They've done some trials the last few years, and you can see over here on the map some of the locations here in southern Minnesota as well as in northern Minnesota with their hybrid rye nitrogen management trial. So we'll look at some of their results they've seen to help us better understand how we can manage nitrogen. So they did these at 6 sites between 2021 and 2024. They did fall pre-plant nitrogen rates between 0 and 120 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And then they came on top of those and did another 0 to 150 pounds of N per acre in the spring. So this is really going to help us know how much to put in the fall versus how much to put in the spring for these different types of management systems. And for all these hybrid rye crops, previous crop was soybean, variety was the KWS Tayo. So key findings. Biggest thing was 30 pounds of nitrogen in the fall supported early growth and tillering. So that fall N, 30 pounds was good enough. We didn't need to go higher than that. Spring N is also critical because sites without spring N did yield less. But one thing we have to be important with looking at nitrogen rates, more is not always better, because if we put too much in the fall or the spring, that's when situations like this happen, where you can see in this picture where we have lots of lodging, which is going to decrease our harvestable yield. So again, we learned that. That's really important. Next thing they learned is the optimal rates were typically between 70 to 90 total pounds of nitrogen. That's 30 pounds in the fall with additional 40 to 60 pounds of nitrogen per acre in the spring. So that's with some caveats. We'll look at this here. The biggest thing to know about hybrid rye, it is a really good nitrogen scavenger. So if we look here, both of the x-axes are total applied nitrogen in pounds per acre, and these are sites in Minnesota, and this is some of the results they found. So this is nitrogen uptake efficiency. This is 100% right here. So you can see at low rates of nitrogen that we apply, uptake efficiency is more than 100%. That means it's taking up the fertilizer N plus soil N. So it's being really efficient at scavenging nitrogen. And not until we get over this 150, 190 pound area in these sites, and over here, 120, 150 pounds at these sites right here in 2023, you can see that we start to go below the 100% efficiency. So it shows how good of a scavenger hybrid rye is, and that if there's nitrogen in the soil, it's going to take it up. So it also, from Minnesota Day, we learned that location mattered. So we had our northern sites. We learned that 30 pounds of N per acre fall pre-plant plus 60 pounds of N per acre in the spring is really important. So kind of looking at that latitude of that northern Minnesota sites is kind of where we're looking at. That's about where we're at. The southern sites, they saw that pre-plant N rates or residual N was high, then you needed less nitrogen in the spring. So if they had good carryover nitrogen, not too much rainfall early in the spring, then they needed less spring N. They also learned this important site here in Becker, Minnesota, which is very sandy soil. Spring-only applications worked best. A lot of the fall N, due to the coarse texture nature of these soils, it didn't last, so that spring N only worked best there. So those are the things we just learned from there. So kind of looking this overall big picture for where we'd probably start out as we're just learning more about this hybrid rye crop, is starting with optimal N rates between 70 and 90 pounds of total N per acre, 30 pounds in the fall, 40 to 60 pounds in the spring is probably going to give you best economical result that you're looking for. And as always, feel free to get a hold of me, my email, or through social media outlets to get more information, or if you're interested in participating in our nutrient management trials here in South Dakota. Thank you for your time.